The obvious differences between freshwater and saltwater is salt, right? But something not so obvious to us just starting out is how quickly and easily your salinity levels can change, which can be deadly to everything that's in your tank. This is one of the new extra steps that we have to worry about when going saltwater, but don't worry, I got you. You ready? Let's go. I mentioned earlier in the series that the salinity level of our saltwater tanks should be 35 parts per thousand or 1.026 specific grade. Same thing, different unit of measure. But the funny thing is that our little ocean in a glass box doesn't want to remain at that salinity level. And this is due to evaporation. In the freshwater world, we know all about evaporation. Sometimes we find our tanks looking like this. And for some of us, it means we haven't done a water change in a while. And for some of us, it simply means it's time to top off the tank, meaning just fill it back up. Yes, I did drain this tank just to get this shot. That's called dedication. And that's pretty much as far as we even worry about it. In the saltwater world, this is a major factor in the livelihood of our wet, salty pets. If you didn't already know, as water evaporates from your tank, everything else in the water remains, including the salt. So that means as your water evaporates, it's dropping the water level of the tank, just like in freshwater, but the salt remaining in the tank just made your new, smaller total water volume saltier. Is that a word? I don't know, saltier. And the more your water evaporates, the saltier your tank will get. The higher your salinity levels will rise. And this is no bueno for your tank inhabitants. So what's the solution to this? We have to replace that evaporated water. But wait, hold on a second. Some of you may think that because you have a saltwater tank, you'd be replacing that evaporated water with salt water as well, right? If you thought this, don't feel bad, because I thought this too, and I'm not afraid to admit it. But if you think about it a bit deeper, when your water level drops in the tank and your salinity level increases, let's say to 36 or 37 parts per thousand, if you added more salt water, which would normally be mixed at 35 parts per thousand, you would still end up with a higher than normal salinity level. The right thing to do is to add fresh water, unsalted, back to the tank. The fresh water will dilute the higher salinity level, bringing it back down to 35 parts per thousand where it should be. Now, if you didn't know this, be real and share that in the comments. So we who didn't know this don't feel so bad, meaning me. So I don't feel bad. And don't forget to input your results into the AquaBuilder app, where it's gonna keep track of not only salinity, but every other parameter you test. You'll see a graph that'll show you any trends that might be happening, and you could catch it before it becomes a problem. Now, depending on your room's temperature and humidity levels, whether you have a lid on your tank or not, everyone's evaporation rate will be different. You have to do a little investigating to find out how much water your tank evaporates on any given day, keeping in mind that changing of the seasons might change your evaporation levels too. So how do you even do this? First, you have to mark your tank's current water level. Use a piece of tape or something, not anything permanent, because one, like I said, is gonna change. And two, we wanna use permanent markings for water changes. We'll get there later on in the series. Make sure that you're subscribed and watching the series so you don't miss it. Now, wait 24 hours, go about your normal day, your normal business, and tomorrow, make note of where your new, lower water level is. If you have a sump on your system, the change in water level will be seen at the sump and not in your tank. Now, grab yourself a measuring cup or some measuring spoons, something to measure how much water will be added back in. This is gonna be different depending on what size tank you have and how much water you evaporate. For this 150-gallon tank, I use this 1-quart measuring cup. If you have a 5-gallon nano tank, you may only need measuring spoons. Now, begin to add fresh water back into your tank while noting how much you're adding back in until the water level returns to its previous level. Now you know how much your tank has evaporated in that 24-hour period. My tank in particular, in this very warm room, wide open at the surface, evaporates about 1 gallon per day. And while it's cool and fun to be learning about your new tank and filling it up daily at first, that will get old quickly. So here comes one of the first pieces of equipment that can add to the cost of keeping a saltwater tank, but will make your life much easier. It's called an auto top-off system, or ATO for short. There are plenty on the market to choose from. What this system does is automatically adds more fresh water to your tank. No more worrying about your tank getting too salty due to evaporation. What you do have to keep in mind though is to make sure that your ATO's reservoir always has fresh water in it. If your reservoir runs dry, then there's no water for your ATO to add to the tank. Now, I have a bit of a different system set up thanks to the geniuses at Infinity Aquariums. Nick and Joe put me on, so I want to do the same to you. What I have is a separate freshwater bucket or reservoir that is connected directly to my water line after it's gone through my RODI filter. This bucket has a float valve installed which automatically stops filling this bucket once it's filled. That way I don't have to stand here and wait while the water is being added and manually turn it off when it's filled. Nor do I have to manually turn it on when some of it has been used to top off the tank. As a backup to this float valve, we also plumbed in a backup drain so that if the float valve failed and the water kept filling, it would be diverted through this drain and sent outside before the bucket overflows. You can use this float valve method on your ATO system as well if you wanted to have a direct water line to your reservoir so it would always stay filled. Now don't get intimidated by this RODI filter. As I said last week, if you want to start with a fish only tank or a fowler tank, you do not need to use RODI water. You can set this same system up with your tap water line. Only difference is that once a day, every 24 hours, you should be dosing this water with Cichlid Prime to remove chlorine and other heavy metals from your tap water. And just like last week, many old school reef guys are gonna stretch out their little Twitter fingers and tell me that it's terrible advice, but I promise you that I've seen and spoken with long-time fish only tank keepers that use tap water successfully without a problem. Why some saltwater guys refuse to believe it or learn something new is beyond me. The reason why I'm using RODI is because I already plan to have a mixed reef tank full of coral, where in that case, using RODI is very, very important, which again, we'll get into in future videos in the series. These old school reefers' main concern is that by using tap water, you're gonna grow nuisance algae and diatoms and have prolonged ugly phase due to the high levels of nutrients and dissolved solids from the tap water. The simple answer to that is to reduce your light. Simple as that. Algae grows by way of photosynthesis. Less light, less algae. And in a fish-only tank, the light is on only for you, not for the fish. Nothing in your tank needs light, except for, wait for it, the algae that you want to avoid. Too much light, you get algae on your background or decor. Not too much light, you don't get algae on your background or your decor. How does that guy do it? Anyway, I digress. I know all this talk of water lines and float valves and plumbing can be very intimidating because it was for me. What I can tell you is once it's done, you just set it and forget it. This isn't something that you'll be continuously tinkering with and adjusting and messing with, unless of course something breaks, but never mind. I've probably only opened this bucket just to get it on camera to show it to you guys. Haven't had any other reason to be in here besides this. So now the question is, how do I get this water into the tank? That's where another great piece of equipment comes in. I'm using a Cichlid Sentia doser, which can automatically dose any liquid supplement to your tank on a set schedule basis. All controlled through the Sentia app, and yes, you can even dose regular fresh water for topping off. The Sentia app is one of the smoothest and fastest apps I've ever played with, and all the dosing is super accurate. If you want to learn more about the doser, I've got a full video on it right here. So what I have is one end of my doser line coming into this bucket of fresh water, and the other end is going into my sump. If you don't have a sump, no problem, you can dose it directly into the tank as well. I set my doser to add 1 gallon of water in a total day by dosing it in small increments about 5 times during the day. That way the salinity stays more stable instead of rising throughout the day and then shooting back down to the proper level all at one time. This simple to install one-time expense will make your saltwater keeping hobby 100 times easier. Trust me. Topping off every day is gonna get old quickly. And what about those long weekends when you wanna get away? Or when it's vacation time and you're gone for a week plus? At that point, an auto top off or one of these Sentia dosers becomes a must have. Now you may have also noticed this other bigger bucket of water also in my closet. This bucket is my salt mixing bucket, and we'll get into how this bucket works, mixing the salt and testing your salinity in this video right here. But before you go, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace.